Hello everybody and welcome to Breaking Fast with Saint Sparklebear. I am Saint Sparklebear and it has been a minute. I am so excited to be here with you all today. Back from my little sabbatical or whatever you want to call it. I'm just super chuffed to be doing a podcast again. Today I am actually talking to or about astonishingly dynamic individual. This person is a queer mentor, elder, and guide. They're a non-binary transmasculine pioneer, an artist, performer, a sci-fi writer, urban mystic, chaotic shaman, and absurdist polymath. And they've done all of this while surviving, living with, and recovering from complex post-traumatic stress disorder. This amazing gem of a human being is me. I'm kind of excited and nervous to share my story, and I've been working on it really hard, and there comes a point where you're like, no, I just gotta share what I gotta say. And at the end of this, I'm gonna go off on some kind of tangent, and we'll see what happens. So, why am I Saint Sparklebear? How to get that name? Why am I so keen on food and creating a table and welcoming everybody to that table? Why am I eating oatmeal today? Because that's my food that I'm eating. And what does any of this have to do with what some would call spirituality or faith, but that I'd like to call being, a fully developed human animal? How do we, as individuals and collectively, create meaning, find purpose, survive suffering, and experience transcendence and ecstasy? I'm going to try to answer those questions in 3 parts, and there's also going to be a poem, my favorite poem, by Rainer Maria Rilke. So grab a plate, pull up a chair. This is Breaking Fast with Saint Sparklebear. This poem by Rainer Maria Rilke, it's one that I discovered way back when I first started seminary and started transition and was doing that whole thing. And the thing that I found, this poem has been with me that entire time, and it's been kind of a companion with me. And there's this line about going out into your heart as onto a vast plain, and the immense loneliness of that. As a trans person, I would say that there is a lot of loneliness, particularly if somebody who came out a while ago. It also is just like a really beautiful kind of representation of what it feels like to be a mystic. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what a mystic is and all of that. A few other things to know. This is from a book called Rilke's Book of Hours, Love Poems to God. And indeed, all of these poems are love poems, and they are written to God. In the poem, God is referred to with the pronouns he, but God, what's God? Don't know, not sure if it matters. B, God is not he, certainly not. No. But it's the pronoun that's being used in the poem. So there you go. I'm going to read the poem. It's translated by Anita Barrows and Joanna Macy. Both really cool ladies. I actually invite you specifically to look up Joanna Macy. She does a lot of work around climate change and helping us all survive that. So here we go. You are not surprised at the force of the storm. You have seen it growing. The trees flee. Their flight sets the boulevards streaming, and you know he whom they flee is the one you move toward. All your senses sing him as you stand at the window. The weeks stood still in summer. The tree's blood rose. Now you feel it wants to sink back into the source of everything. You thought you could trust that power when you plucked the fruit. Now it becomes a riddle again, and you again a stranger. Summer was like your house. You knew where each thing stood, Now you must go out into your heart as onto a vast plain. Now the immense loneliness begins. The days go numb. The wind sucks the world from your senses like withered leaves. Through the empty branches, the sky remains. It is what you have. Be earth now, an even song. Be the ground lying under that sky. Be modest now, like a thing ripened until it is real, so that he who began it all can feel you when he reaches for you. As I said, I'm going to be doing this in 3 parts today. First part is called Interior Castles, Oatmeal, and the Birth of a Sparklebear. You find yourself alone on a winding path in a dark Midwestern forest. What little sunlight there is filters down through the canopy of oak, elm, and sycamore on the wing of birdsong and the spines of falling leaves. The path continues to wind, and you find yourself disoriented. Anxiety grasps your throat until you breathe through it and continue down the path. It's a warm, early spring afternoon, and those are made for wandering. And anyway, there's something rhythmically satisfying about the crunching of old leaves underfoot against the constant primordial whisper of the breeze. Then suddenly, the path stops. It stops at a house. It's an old cabin with a wraparound porch and an overgrown garden growing wild in the front yard. And you've seen plenty of horror movies, and yet there's something compelling about this house. It's mysterious. And there's a sense that it's bigger on the inside than the outside, who to speak. Your curiosity gets the better of you, and before you've talked yourself out of it, your foot falls on the first hard wood stair as it lets out a groan of disuse and abandon. The door's oddly polished silver handle is spherical and gives way to your hand as the front door's heavy hinges give a gritty moan of welcome. You find yourself in an ancient space that also seems totally present. It appears as if the home's inhabitants left just 5 minutes ago. A teacup is poised delicately on a table next to a warm chair and fragrant leather volumes that look like they would crumble if you picked them up from their shelf. A pipe sits askew on the table. The smell of Irish tobacco wafts in the air. The mystery of this place just grows, and so does your curiosity. Dust motes flit in the afternoon sunlight as small blue cornflowers cast their spectral glow off wilting fragments of wallpaper. Everywhere, decay is the primary resident, in the exquisite and balletic way that the earth returns all things to itself and does so in its own time. The lifespan of death being far more infinite and breathtaking in its scope. You have a feeling this house has hidden depths and secret rooms. You're beginning to look at an old diary on the table when you hear a crash and a monstrous, unspeakable roar of pain. You calm down your initial, oh, hell no, when you realize that it might be an animal in need of help. You determine the source of the noise and approach the decaying cellar door. You open it with a crack to see if you can tell what kind of animal you're dealing with. As the cellar door creaks open, the creature lets out a louder, more dangerous, and more pitiful moan. It's in pain, and it is big. Your heart beats a mile a minute as you attempt to breathe through your flight response. You crane your neck down the stairs and see a massive black bear. Its calf is mangled in the rusting jaws of a metal bear trap. The muscle of its torso contorted and strained, the bear is on the verge of giving up. It lets out another roar. There's nothing you can do for something that big, that dangerous, and that much pain. You leave, and the bear remains. That bear? That was me. And the house? That is also me. Let me explain. It's 2012. I'm working 2 minimum wage jobs, 12 hours a day. I have 4 gallstones, over 100 $1,000 in student loan debt, one major kidney infection, and my 63-year-old father is dying of esophageal cancer. You could say that I was in a rough place. Just a little. And at the time, I was meeting with a wise and deeply compassionate spiritual director named Mary. And a spiritual director is like a psychologist for your soul, a physical therapist for your spirit. They guide folks along the path toward fuller spiritual lives and fuller, more meaningful lives in general. And that's something I do now without all the credentialing, because that costs money. Anyway, Mary was guiding me through all of this while I was also experiencing a crisis in my calling to ministry. I just attained my master's degree, my master's of divinity. But the stress of being the first trans and non-binary person to graduate from my UU seminary, while also trying to fake it till I maked it in terms of my PTSD, well, it led to trouble, marginalization, ethical misconduct, and flunking out of a chaplain residency program where I was told to stay in the closet. And frankly, the only good thing about the residency program was the daily bowl of oatmeal that I began to eat. Mary held all of my pain, my guilt, and my shame with non-judgmental compassion and loving kindness. She believed I could grow and be better, and I believed in Mary. And I still do. Okay, that's great, but how am I this house and this bear? One of the tools of spiritual direction is something called the interior castle. The guide asks the guided to imagine their interior life, their inner selves, their spirit, so to speak, as a big old house or a castle or whatever you imagine your inner life might be. On the TV show Hannibal, he calls it his mental palace. And if you haven't seen Hannibal, you really should. Same difference. Mental palace, interior castle, same thing. The term itself was coined by the kinky little mystic, Saint Teresa of Avila. She really loved Jesus, like with a flogger by herself under moonlight. She'd have a really nice time now. But yeah, Teresa of Avila, she's the person who first used the term interior castle to describe the interiority of her life and her relationship with the ineffable being the thing they call God. My interior castle is an expansive cabin full of occult, spiritual, and esoteric magics, and it exists deep in an Ohio forest, and there's all sorts of secret rooms and weird compartments and weird things going on, and if you wander in far enough, it becomes very MC Escher-ish, and you gotta know a bunch of puzzles and secret codes to get out. But at that time, in 2012, my cabin was wrecked. There was this monster, and I'd been keeping the monster being my PTSD, locked up in an old steamer trunk under a bunch of furniture in an old room on the 3rd floor that no one goes to. But that monster had gotten loose, and it went on a rampage. Now, I hadn't identified the creature as a bear yet. It was just a beast full of rage and misery, destroying everything in its path before finding itself trapped in a basement, dying slowly in the maws of a bear trap. After a long silence, I had just self-pitied myself out, and Mary asked me, "Who gets trapped in bear traps?" "What?" I sniffled and tilted my head to the side like a curious dog. I was not expecting the question. She rephrased, "Who's typically in a bear trap?" As if that's going to help, Mary. Thank you so much. I blinked my eyes, I breathed in, and I looked at her, feeling defeated. "A bear?" I answered. "Yes, exactly!" She put her finger on her nose like a sweet little hedge witch and smiled gently at me, her eyes glistening with tears. I wailed, even more pitifully than before. "So I'm a bear? Should I be a bear? What does it mean? That doesn't save me. What's going to save me?" She didn't react at all. A consummate professional. What she did do, however, was pull out a pen and a pad of paper, and she said, "I'm writing you a prescription. Go read about bears. What makes them tick? How do they live? Where do bears exist in your religious and cultural heritage? Now, immediately after I left her office, I cracked open a Lives of the Saints book, and every queer ex-Catholic you know may or may not have a Lives of the Saints book on their bookshelf. I'm not saying they do or they don't, but, they might. So I cross-referenced that with an earnest prayer to the oracle of Saint Google, and lo, my answer arrived in 3.2 seconds. Saint Columbanus. After I stopped being 12 and snickering at the end of the name, which is anus, I started to read about the dude. Saint Columbanus was born in the 4th century CE in Ireland. He was a charismatic and fervently religious dude. He traveled all throughout pre-modern Europe, opening up centers of education and enlightenment. But before he did all of that stuff, he was this crazy youth. To paraphrase fellow Clevelander and hip-hop artist Kid Cudi, he was wildin' because he was young, and then he became chill and old. Columbanus was a musician, a poet, an educator, and a mystic. We had a few things in common. He was also known for taking long, solitary retreats, something that I'm pretty fond of doing myself. He would find far-off and remote locations and spend months in contemplation and spiritual practice. One such sabbatical is the context for his most legendary of saintly shenanigans. Also, I want you to try saying saintly shenanigans 3 times fast, okay? Ready? Let's do this together. Saintly shenanigans, saintly shenanigans, saintly shenanigans. Well done, everyone. So one day, Brother Bonus arrived at a particularly cozy-looking and secluded cave, and it was ideal for his retreat. He entered the cave and was greeted most fearsomely by a bear. The bear, much like the saint, was fresh out of fucks and in no mood for company. Especially some Christians showing up and being a nuisance in the middle of the day. Seriously, did these people have no boundaries? The bear clearly stated her boundaries in a fearsome and reverberating roar. The saint stood there and took the bear's displeasure and saliva without flinching. Columbanus explained that the cave was a perfect location for his saint business and asked humbly for the use of the cave. The bear was pretty impressed by the saint's chutzpah. She decided to be a nice Ursa and do something major for our saint dude. Columbanus and the bear made a deal. The bear would get the cave back after the saint was done with his retreat, and in return, the saint would bless the bear. This sounded like a good deal to the bear, and both mammals shook on it. Columbanus' saint medal features himself and the bear nose to snout. The bear is standing up on its hind legs, very human-like, and they are shaking hands. The saint is haloed, and the bear looks most bear-like, as in the animal, not the gay subculture. Although, when Mary said to find bears in my cultural heritage, I don't think she quite expected where I would go with that as a pansexual, transmasculine, non-binary person. But before we get to all that, let's discuss science and bears. In particular, water bears. Part 2. Sacred telescopes, big red spots, and microscopic bears. My parents, they raised me in a few holy churches. Of course, there was Catholicism, but also concert halls, art museums, and movie theaters. They were giant geeks. Bless them. My favorite childhood shrine, though, was Cleveland's Natural History Museum. I would go in there and be in awe of the immensity of creation. My eyes widened at the sight of towering dinosaur fossils. I know you know what that feels like. My brain whirred as I pondered the truly awesome process of evolution and my human's place within it. Kids think about these things, y'all. They really do. And in this place, there was no conflict between what I learned on Sunday about being one bread and one body and what I saw in the world and learned from science, that all of our bread and all of our bodies come from one entity, that being the earth. All of it wrapped me in this strange, complex, jazz-like world of infinite wonder. But the holy of holies, the thing that made the museum most amazing to my young and curious self, was the observatory and its giant telescope. One cool spring evening, the museum opened up its observatory for guests, and my father and I went. We passed through the silent nighttime halls of the museum, past shark skulls and dioramas, and up the winding metal staircase that led to this massive silver telescope haloed in moonlight. With each flight, we observed photographs of gaseous nebulae, ancient clouds of matter and time raising their heads from brightly colored mists. To my child's mind, they were very much like the Catholic Stations of the Cross, the life, death, and resurrection of stars. I remember approaching a small, somewhat unsteady ladder, my hand on the shoulder of a volunteer in a lab coat as they lifted me to the telescope. And I gazed with wonder and fear out that narrow lens and into a vast and ever-expanding universe. And I was so scared that I was going to see an alien. And I'm quite sure that we will someday. As a precocious little mystic, I later commented to my dad about how similar the experience was to the weekly communion that I had at church. I had just been invited by a representative of the divine to partake of the divine on behalf of the divine, to remind me that I was divine. I didn't quite say it like that at 8 years old, but that was what I was talking about. That was the first time that I saw Jupiter's great red spot, roiling in all of that endless, chaotic, yet perfectly ordered spiral. And my small body shivered as I realized I existed in the same creation with this massive storm millions of miles away. I existed with this power and enormity. I could be in communion with planets. We were part of the same body. And honestly, it scared the living crap out of me more than any alien ever could. And that's just one of the childhood experiences that made me a mystic. To be a mystic is to live in constant transcendent wonder, in awe of creation and whatever's at its foundation. I have always been this way, despite myself and my otherwise surly and pessimistic outlook. I've gotten to a place in my journey where I identify as a non-theist, similar to being non-binary. We'll talk more about that in another episode. And yet, the continual shock of awe at the heart of the experience of mysticism, the onslaught of concrete divinity, and that mashup of meaning makes life both interesting and kaleidoscopic. But it doesn't make it easy. In fact, over the years, I've survived a lot of trauma because of it. The real world is not a particularly kind place to mystics, and it never has been. But we are a bunch of ornery survivors, annoyingly sharing our hopeful visions with the world. And that brings me to one of the bears in Sparklebear. And that bear is the water bear, or tardigrade. If you're talking pure survival and adaptability, the tardigrade is hands down the most badass creature in existence. The last 5 major worldwide extinction events crushed them. And the bears are doing pretty well with the 6th one, too. They are microscopic and chunky, and they can live anywhere. Volcanic vents, tardigrade. Frozen in a glacier, tardigrade. The ocean, yeah, they're called water bears, so I'll let you figure that one out for yourself. These little 8-legged snack attack wonders, they've survived the vacuum of space via a process called cryptobiosis, and they've come back to tell the tale. Additionally, for a microscopic creature, these little bears are freaking adorable, hence their nickname. Me and the bears kind of get along. I myself am small and adorable, and I've survived a whole lot. I also enjoy chilling and eating snacks, and I believe that all of us humans have the potential and the ability to work together as a species to not only survive climate change, but also remain chill and well supplied in snacks. But We can't leave any creatures behind, no matter how microscopic. Tardigrades can teach us a lot about attitudes of survival and about how to get along and survive together. They've done it for a lot longer than we have, after all. Part 3. Pumpkins, performance art, and profane sacred spaces. It was the moment when the performance artist began fucking the pumpkin that I finally and officially cracked. In retrospect, I'm gazing amidst and upon a debaucherously luscious scene from some twisted and gorgeous Renaissance mural. There I am, October 2005, Spin nightclub at the corner of Belmont and Halsted, not Sicily, 1932, and I'm surrounded by beauty, color, and sex. The artist, who's on stage, smiles broadly in diffuse blue backlight, while a bright white spotlight is shown squarely on a typical orange pumpkin. They carve the pumpkin, as described by a vintage instructional recording on how to properly carve a pumpkin. Their hands defined in spotlight, clearly showing careful and fluid cuts. Z carves one round hole, just one hole, perfectly round, and presents it to the congregation. The spotlight follows the pumpkin as the artist holds it up above her head like some priestess, and the audience accepts the offering in an eruption of hollers, whistles, claps, and laughter. And I'm just there agog and overwhelmed as the artist turns around. And through my amorous friends, I see the artist put the hole in the pumpkin to good use. Her face contorts in comical expressions of ecstasy as she spreads pumpkin guts all over her torso. It's almost sacramental. She's so committed to her accent. She's so ready to just bring the crowd along into the state of transcendent frenzy. And we all go there. And I would know something about sacraments and ecstatic transcendence because 5 hours earlier, or you'd think I would, I sat in a pew for Catholic Mass. And my mouth struggled past a phrase that it had grown increasingly wary of. This was my first month of seminary, and my first month coming out to myself as trans. The priest held the Eucharist above his head and intoned the words, "This is the body of blah-de-blah-blah, given up for you." I kneeled and whispered. That phrase, like a poisoned dart, struck me in the still air of the chapel, and it was a poison that I administered to myself. I spoke through hushed lips, "Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but I'll only say the word, and I shall be healed." Those words always hurt me to say out loud, and the congregation always did every week during Mass, and it hurt because I believed it was true. I believed that I wasn't worthy of God, of my own happiness, of my own life even. I grew up as a queer, gender non-binary smartass in the 80s and 90s, and that came with a lot of abuse and isolation, and there were no words to describe what I was. The place where I felt protected and safe was in the church, the exact opposite of so many queer kids, and honestly, I was never safe in the church either, and that's part of the reason I left. I'd always been a mystic. I'd encountered transcendent force since that is unspeakable or unknowable since childhood. It continues to defy description. And I knew that I experienced the world differently than my peers and a whole lot of the adults around me. Life was this sacred mystery. It was a luscious one, ripe for exploring. My lifelong mysticism and my calling to ministry landed me in Hyde Park in Chicago, voraciously taking as many classes as possible to figure out how to bring peace to the world because I was definitely not in peace with myself. Ultimately, what I did learn is how to practice peace for myself. But at the time, I just needed to start transitioning. My life was used to tenuousness and liminality. I frequently wandered painful places of both religious and sexual exile. Even in 2005, there were no words for what I was, for the spaces I occupied with my body and the desires of what that body entailed. My whole life, all the roads to community and connection, all the prevailing powers, religious, cultural, sexual norms, they all told me that I was abnormal or wrong. And I was like, oh yeah, well, I'll just go ahead and put my abnormal body right here at these crossroads, and either I'll get hit or I'll learn something. I got hit and I learned something. That night, however, I careened out of Spin Nightclub into the windy intersection of Belmont and Halstead. I couldn't breathe. I was conflicted in panic between my queer and spiritual self, trying to reconcile what I had just experienced with what I knew of God, and frankly finding more honesty and transcendence in that body performance than I found in church in a long time. I panicked because I had just committed my life, a move to Chicago, and heaped on a student loan debt into the pursuit of legitimate ministry. And yet I knew that that was not the place I was going to end up. As an aside, I don't know if you noticed, I mentioned the student loans in the first act, and then they came back here in the third one. So it's like a gun, but it's student loans. Okay, so that moment that I did that whole thing where I had my oh my God crisis, since then I've seen and felt holiness, more intentionality, more striving and honest community, more rapture and love and ecstatic worship in the confines of theaters and art lofts and LGBT and queer spaces and kink clubs. All these places where the holy isn't supposed to be, that's where the holy has been, outside of the walls of any chapel or church. From those days of dysphoria and searching, I have become an indecent theologian. And that's a term, indecent theologian, coined by a bisexual theologian named Marcella Alphys Reed. And I'm going to mention her a lot because she's my theological girlfriend. I just think she's amazing. So she wrote this book called The Queer God. And in it, she said that an indecent theologian has learned to survive with several passports. An indecent theologian is somebody who finds and practices the holy in places where God is not supposed to be, and often travels between the worlds of the sacred and the profane, making a mess of both and kind of like blurring the lines as a result. And it was a while ago in my journey to the countries of the church that I realized that the people of God weren't speaking for what is truly at the center of all of our beings and at the heart of creation. They weren't and aren't interested in caring for or saving people or the world. They want it to end so their Jesus can come back. They want people to be judged. So it's up to us weirdos and heathens and outlaws and pagans and whatever to bring acceptance, creation, love, life into the world in our own ways, of course. Much like oatmeal is versatile, I believe that like we start from this basic place and then we add our own little elements. So some people like cherries, some people like blueberries, some people like different kinds of nuts or granola or something, or some folks like putting yogurt in. And that's kind of like what a spiritual life is like. Or what it can be, because we gotta practice it, right? Anyway, gone are the times when I felt unworthy and I thought the world as a sinful place, just ripe for apocalypse. Now I see infinite worthiness. I see infinite possibility, but it's in the doing. It's in striving to do better, to create anything rather than destroy, to love and live fiercely in this world right now, in a world that teaches us to fear everything and everyone and run away from life. What we can do is we can build ourselves and build a new world beyond the present one that's crumbling. and do it in exciting and weird ways. So Saint Sparklebear, I'm living as both a saint and a bear. I'm holy, I'm also very surly and testy, and sometimes I just need a snack and a nap. It's about walking those lines between, the bright and shiny happy things about the spirituality and the real reality that suffering is ever present and people are just, dedicated to ignorance. And what do we do with one another? Golly, I just don't know. But we're also brilliant and wonderful and amazing. So we're all of those things, just like it's a saint and a bear, goodness and evil, all of these things that kind of exist simultaneously. And not only that, but at the heart of life, at the heart of the spiritual life, is the absolute necessity to take care of ourselves and our bodies, just our bodies, and the bodily needs of others. We're all contradictions and complexities as human beings, but it's real simple to take care of each other. We need food, we need water, we need housing, we need connection, we need love. We can do this for one another. We've got to take care of the body. I mean all bodies, and the body of the planet on which we live. As Saint Sparklebear, I want to cultivate that part of our brain that connects us to the larger and the more than, and then to do good in the world with it. So after 4 billion years of evolution, there's still that bit of our brain that strives to make the world a better place, feels connection to the larger than, loves our neighbor, etc., etc. That God parts, quote unquote. But now most of us don't want to attend a church. So what do we do to exercise that particular bit of brain meat? How can we do it in our own way? How can we create a more mindful, creative, connected, loving life? Easy stuff, easy peasy. So now you know. Now you know why I'm the Sparklebear. Now you Saint Sparklebear. Now you know a little bit about the oatmeal. By the way, the oatmeal I'm eating today, and here on Breaking Fast with Saint Sparklebear. You can find more about the podcast on the New Faith New Media Network, which is the network of which I'm a part, at newfaithnewmedia.net. Gail Gallagher wrote my theme song, and boy, is it a doozy. Wesley Sloat adapted my little logo based on some art by Jan Doty. And I am Saint Sparklebear, and thanks so much for coming to my table. Can't wait to see you next week. Bye.
New Faith, New Media.
Theology.
Nerdery.
Community.